Remember when taxpayers bailed out the banks? Since the public was funding their pay, some suggested that we do a cap on their bonuses. Makes sense, right? But the banks cried about their need to, are you ready for this? Retain talent, because they were so talented. Now, it was an argument that they made over and over. How could they keep anyone in the banking business without at least $500,000 in bonuses? And usually a hell of a lot more than that. Now, you know what's funny? I don't hear people making that argument about teachers. When it comes to teachers being paid by the public, all we hear about is how we have to cut their pay and we have to cut their pensions to balance the budget off of their backs. No talk about how we have to retain their talent. Now, of course, they don't have the talent of destroying our whole economy like the bankers did. They just teach our kids. The reality is that most workers, including teachers, often need collective bargaining. Why? Because if Melissa goes in to ask for a raise by herself, here's the answer she's normally going to get from the place that she works if she doesn't have collective bargaining. You're fired. I'm going to get Bob to replace you. End of this. You're done. The whole point of collective bargaining is that if you put all of the employees together, then they can be on an even playing field with management. If they pull that rug out from underneath you, you're in a world of trouble. And exactly where corporate executives want you, defenseless and at the mercy of your employer. Now, luckily, most Americans already got this. Look at this USA Today Gallup poll. When asked, are you in favor of a law taking away some collective bargaining rights of most unions? 33% they said, yeah, we favor that. We want to take away those rights. 61% said, no, we don't want it taking away. That's a huge advantage, and people get it. You need collective bargaining, otherwise you're in a lot of trouble. But guess what? There are signs that teacher unions also lead to better student performance. When you look at graduation rates in high school, in states with collective bargaining for teachers, they do fantastic. You see those top four right there? All collective bargaining, the top four, okay? Much higher than the national average. And then when you look at how teacher unions affect student performance overall, when they put the 17 different studies together, a professor who's now at the University of Louisville concluded, quote, the evidence suggests that unionism raises achievement modestly for most students in public schools. Now, look, this evidence is interesting. I'm not saying it's overwhelming. And when they put the studies together, they said it has a modest positive effect. It's not overwhelming, but hey, it looks like the unions actually help the kids. They certainly help on the graduation rates, and it looks like they help in overall performance too. Well, you say, all right, okay, so they got good teachers and they got good students coming out, but how about the deficits? Doesn't getting rid of collective bargaining help straighten out your deficit at least? Nope. Deficits in states without collective bargaining are actually running at above 30%. You got Nevada, you got Arizona, you got North Carolina. These are huge deficits as a percentage of the spending in that state. So how about states where they have collective bargaining? Now, those states where the deficits are supposed to be terrible, right? Oh my God, collective bargaining kills your deficit. No, it doesn't. They have actually less than 10% of spending as compared to the deficit. Massachusetts, as you see, is at 8.6. New Mexico is at 6.1. Montana also incredibly low. So it turns out getting rid of collective bargaining doesn't necessarily save you any money. It seems to make students perform worse, and it hurts people who we trust to teach our kids. Now, what does that say about our values? Well, actually, it doesn't say anything about our values because the country agrees with us. We say, yeah, we need the collective bargaining. So what does it say about Republican values? And what does it say if you vote for them and those values? That's what we want you to think about. Now, to help me think about it is David Sirota. He's a national syndicated columnist and host on AM 760 in Colorado. And honestly, the guy I stole this idea from. David, you wrote today about teachers and bankers and comparing the two. That was originally your idea. Tell me more about that.
Well, we have two sets of public employees or publicly paid employees over the last few years here in the news, right? You've had publicly paid bankers who've been paid handsomely by multi-trillion-dollar Treasury and Federal Reserve bailouts. And you have another set of public employees who've been in the news, teachers, firefighters, police officers. And there seems to be two standards. The one standard for the bankers is we can't limit their pay. When pay caps were proposed to limit their executive pay to $500,000 a year, they said we can't limit their pay because it would hurt their ability to retain talent. The same argument hasn't been made for, as you say, for teachers. In Wisconsin, they make an average of $48,000 a year. And the question is, why the two standards? And what the answer is that the Republicans who say that we shouldn't limit the pay of publicly taxpayer-financed bankers, but we should limit the pay of teachers, is that they believe that the priority should be for the government to better and better reward people for going into a financial industry that cannibalizes wealth rather than into parts of our economy like teaching, like police, like being a police officer or a firefighter, that actually protects wealth and builds public wealth.
David, let's talk about the irony here, because I think there's a huge irony. Because they say, oh, these public unions, they're taking public money and then influencing politics with it. But in reality, the guys who claim to be libertarians and in favor of free markets are the ones who seem to have captured the government and milk it for so much money, and that's the bankers.
That's exactly right. Look, it's definitely true that there's a problem in our politics, a pay-to-play problem all across our politics. You've got to put in money to get any legislator, in many cases, to listen to you. But the issue here is that if the people who are claiming that this is a problem about unions, they have nothing to say about the fact that corporations spend hugely more amount of money buying politicians than unions. That they don't seem to have any problem with corporations buying regulators to not regulate industries, corporations buying legislators to pass massive tax subsidies to those corporations. So there's really a double standard here, a hypocrisy. And I just keep going back to the idea that if we're going to pay publicly financed bankers more than $500,000 a year, shouldn't we at least be paying teachers a little more than $48,000 or $50,000 a year?
And that's exactly the problem with the values that these guys propose. There are no values at all. And then when teachers get together, or firefighters, or any of these unions say, hey, let us at least bargain with you. I mean, we've agreed to the pay cuts. Let us at least have the ability to bargain with you. Hell no. They get crushed.
And here's the problem. Here's the real problem, right? If we want better schools, if we want better firefighters, better police forces, we're going to have to apply the same rhetoric, the same idea that we've applied, and I don't think very, very properly, to banks. If we want to attract better teachers, we're going to need to pay teachers better. If we're going to attract good police forces and good firefighting units in the future, we're going to need to pay for that. That's Econ 101. That's if you get what you pay for, you don't get what you don't pay for. So you can't really complain that your schools aren't good if you're also saying that you want to cut the pay of teachers and cut their pensions.
All right, David Sirota, a great article, and thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake.